Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week. Today we are going to look at the history of Manchester City's firm, the Guvnors. We will look at an in-depth, complete history of the Cool Cats, the Guvnors, the Young Guvnors, and everything in between. We will look at how, why, when, and where the Notorious crew were formed, and we will listen to founder members and top lads involved with the mob about what was really like being a member. We will listen to their accounts of tear-ups as they tell us truthfully about the violence involved. You may think you know or seen other videos, but this will be the most truthful, accurate insight that you will find. Let's start with a little bit of history, and then we will dive right into the juicy bits coming from actual members of the firm. The Guvnors are a notorious football hooligan firm associated with Manchester City Football Club. Their history is intertwined with other groups, such as the Cool Cats and the Young Guvnors, each contributing to the complex tapestry of Manchester City's hooligan scene. The Cool Cats were active during the 70s and 80s. The Cool Cats were among Manchester City's earliest hooligan groups. Notably, this firm was predominantly composed of black supporters from areas like Hume and Moss Side and was led by the Francis brothers. We will delve much further into the origin of the Cool Cats in a minute. The mainline service crew emerged in the 1980s, a period marked by significant football hooliganism across the UK. The name Main Line is a play on words, referencing the Main Road Stadium, Manchester City's home ground at the time. Tony Sullivan's Sully, a leading figure within the Main Line service crew. Tony Sullivan chronicled his experiences in the book, Sully, the Football Thug Who Didn't Give a F, the inside story of Manchester City's notorious mainline service crew. In this memoir, he reflects on the violent encounters and the culture surrounding the firm during its heyday. Notoriety. The firm gained a reputation for being one of the most feared hooligan groups in the country, engaging in violent confrontations with rival supporters. The Guvnors, following the era of the Cool Cats. The Guvnors emerged as the primary hooligan firm associated with Manchester City. Their formation marked a new chapter in the club's hooligan history, with the group gaining notoriety for their organised activities. The Young Guvnors are an offshoot of the Guvnors. The Young Guvnors were established to involve younger supporters in the firm's activities. Andrew Little Benny Bennion is recognised as a founding member of the Young Guvnors. Andrew Little Benny Bennion was a prominent figure in the Young Guvnors. Bennion was instrumental in organising the group's activities during the 1980s. Interestingly, he held anarchist beliefs and actively opposed the presence of far-right groups like the National Front at Manchester City's grounds. The Blazing Squad. The Blazing Squad originated from a few teenagers who were ardent supporters of Manchester City. Over time, they organised themselves into a firm that became notorious for its involvement in football-related violence. Modern policing techniques and the advent of spotters and tactical aid units have forced modern-day hooligans to arrange meets with rival fans, typically in areas well away from grounds, and often with supporters whose team are not even in action that day. The Blazing Squad is one of this new breed of football firms, small in number, but ready to travel all over the country to fight their rivals. Carl Moran, a prominent member of the Blazing Squad, Carl Moran has provided an insider's perspective on the group's activities. He authored the book Blazing Squad, the inside story of Man City's young hooligans, detailing the firm's evolution and operations. The evolution from the Cool Cats to the Guvnors, and subsequently the Young Guvnors, reflects the dynamic nature of football hooliganism in Manchester. Each group left its mark on the club's history, contributing to the complex narrative of fan culture associated with Manchester City. Mickey Francis is a big name and character in the Manchester circles. He is also a terrace legend, and one of the faces behind the Manchester City firm. He has led a very interesting life and has a great story to tell. Let's listen to how he helped form the Guvnors, as he gives insight into how the mob were formed and what was like being part of the crew. These are his own words. I was attracted to football as a sport, just like every other kid in my area. I took to thuggery because that's the person I was. My brothers were the same. Donald, the oldest, was a charismatic figure who organised one of the premier gangs of the 70s, the so-called Cool Cats. They were unknown to the media, but to fellow hooligans learned to fear and respect them. Later, as I will describe, the clique changed in character and personnel and adopted the name of Mainline Service Crew, making newspaper headlines around the country. Finally, the name changed again, to the Guvnors. The crew in which I was jailed for leading, a hardcore firm of experienced battlers taking one last plunge of the terrace roller coaster. Those three gangs spanned the heyday of the worst or the best years of the hooligan culture, from the crazy bootboy days of the mid-70s to the casual gangs and the ground-wrecking sprees of the 80s. There is nothing like them now at Manchester City, and for that, many people will breathe a sigh of relief. Unlike some, I don't seek to justify what I did. I wasn't fighting for my country's honour or defending my home. I was a thug, pure and simple. Nor I am one of those figures beloved by the media, the successful professional or city yuppie who lives in a suburb and wears his hooligan credentials like a fashion accessory. I was born and raised in a slum, in one of the toughest inner city areas in Europe, a district that saw one of the worst riots of this century. I have been in trouble with the law almost continuously from childhood. If I hadn't become a football hooligan, what would I have become? Rich or dead, I would say. Our first experience of football violence came from minding the cars. West Ham played at Main Road in the early 70s, and trouble came after the game. Blokes were fighting all around the ground and it spilled into the side streets where we were hanging around. West Ham lads were charging around smashing windows and all the other kids legged it, but we stood there with the city men. We didn't actually do much, but our mates were impressed, saying, "Did you see the Francis brothers?" Gradually, I got more into the football scene. City were doing well in the mid-70s. In 1974 they reached the League Cup final again, losing to Wolves. 2 years later, they won the same competition by beating Newcastle 2-1, but I was more interested in what was happening off the pitch. The cash I was earning from minding cars in the streets around the ground meant I could go to games more regularly with my mates, rather than with my dad, which meant I could run amok. At that time, City were not known for having a good firm, but Main Road had the potential to be a hotbed of violence. Crowds were huge, segregation was crap, and the policing was a joke. Away fans could easily get lost wandering around the narrow streets and dead ends, especially at night. We knew every nook and cranny, where to hide, where to wait, and how to get away. There was loads of places to ambush and launch attacks without getting sussed. You could do almost anything and get away with it. We started to go on the Kippax. That was our end, where all the lads and singers went, and was a target for rival firms. The objective of football hooliganism in the mid-70s was to take each other's end, be it the Cop at Liverpool or the Streaford end at Manchester United, the Shed at Chelsea, the Shelf at Spurs, or wherever. The idea was to arrive mob-handed, infiltrate your opponent's main section, and try and take it over. Someone would kick off, fists and feet would fly into the panicking home supporters, the police would charge in, and eventually the away firm would either be chucked out, or led on to the edge of the pitch, and escorted round to the proper section, to the cheers of the away end. There was no fencing to keep you apart in the good old days. Even at City and United derby games, lads was only separated by a length of rope. Stealing scarves was popular with younger hooligans. Everyone wore scarves, either tied around wrists or hanging from belts. The idea was to collect as many as you could. Usually there wasn't much violence involved. You went up to someone, ripped their scarf off and ran away with it, and that was your day made. My bedroom wall was covered in scarves, My aim was to get one from every team in the first division. I had loads of lead scarves. The fashion for teenagers then was two-tone pants and brogues, and patch pockets, like a clown's. The name Cool Cats came from Cool Cat Sally, a woman in a catsuit in a dodgy 70s film. One of our Donald's nicknames was Sally, because he was always tidying up in the house, and someone then stuck the label on our mob. We were one of the first named gangs of the era. Soon the words appeared on graffiti around the area, and long before we were known further afield. Within a couple of years there was hardly a football thug in the country that hadn't heard of the Cool Cats. The leader was our Donald. He was a maniac. He was game, loyal, and would never run. He was actually far better known as a football hooligan than I was, but the later high profile of the Governor's Court case brought all the publicity on my head. Although only in his teens when the Cool Cats formed, he already had a record for fighting at matches and had been in Borstal. This is how he remembers the early days, in his own words. The Cool Cats was a black thing to start with. A lot of the black and half-caste lads from the area gradually joined together. City wasn't known as a hooligan club, but there was a few mobs, like the Beer Monsters and the Beano Boys from Gorton. There was also a big national front following, Scotty and Co. Although there was a mutual respect between us and them, they didn't like us. It was skin deep and there was friction. In the end, it spilled over. Our first organised battle as the Cool Cats was against our own supporters. At a home game, our Chris went to the toilets and got done by 5 or 6 NF geezers. We had had enough, so after the match we waited for them to leave the ground, and as they came out we did them. A lot of black kids then had afro combs that folded out. We would sharp them on the street and then use them as weapons. We also stormed the Sherwood Inn near the ground, which at that time was their pub. There was this fear factor of 50 black and half-caste lads. It is a psychological game. Being half-caste, you are neither black or white. You get it from both sides, so it makes you very tough. We clocked on to using belts with thick buckles as weapons, and we set up a little firm called the Belt Rippers. We drew pictures of hangmen all over the walls, Hang Manchester United and Hang the NF. We were not the biggest crew, but we were close-knit. If I had to put a year on when it all started, I would have to say 1974. And the Cool Cats ran until about the year 1983. Our first game away, we walked to Old Trafford. We were fighting all the way. Soon the group grew from 50 to 100. The NF went everywhere by coach, so we decided to get our own coach together. Leeds away was our first trip. We always had white lads integrated into our mob. And I remember how the Leeds fans, who were notoriously racist, couldn't understand a black and white mob together. It freaked them out. Some of the white lads included Frank McGorry, a big guy from Longsight, Wolf, Jemmy Gittins. Only small, but what a nutter. Madroy too. The Kipax became a fortress. There was the Barmy Army, then the Beer Monsters, then the lunatic fringe like Jimmy Gittins, and another lad called Jimmy from Hume. He was a knife man. He's dead now. He got turned over on a bad drug deal. The front door of his flat was kicked open and he got stabbed. I just want to veer away from the Francis brothers now and get some stories about the Guvnors from other sources, including other lads involved with the crew. I am aware what has happened to the Francis brothers since and where they are now, especially Mickey, but to be honest, that's none of my business and not what this video is about. The video is about casual culture, in particular Manchester City in the 70s, 80s and 90s, with a bit about current day. What former top lads are doing now away from the casual scene is nothing to do with me. Good luck to them. Anyway, yeah, let's hear from another Manchester City boy's take on the firm in the early days. The Cool Cats, however, were just one of a number of mobs that followed City. Geography more than race was often the defining feature of City gangs. The Cool Cats attracted fighters because of their growing reputation, but were never able to fully unify all the groups, and as a result, City was quite disorganised. The Kipax had boot boys just like any other firms. They were replaced by the Cool Cats when the brothers came onto the scene. There were loads white lads with them, but the majority of the hardcore in the Cool Cats were black. We were probably one of the most disorganized mobs about. Everyone did their own thing apart from the brothers' firms, and because of that, we never got the recognition many felt we deserved. One of the more violent encounters during that period was an away trip to Everton in 1976. The Cool Cats organised 6 coaches for the short journey. In fact, they were the only City mob to make the trip that day. Everton greatly outnumbered them as they attacked after the game, but it proved to be a defining moment for the City mob, as they were told by their leader that running wasn't an option. Not only would they not be allowed back on the coach, but they would also get a personal hiding. We did the business, but we had loads of casualties back on the coach, one of the lads said. One of the key hooligan groups at City drew its followers not from Moss Side, but from an inner city band from North and East Manchester. Though they didn't have a gang name, they included some of Main Road's top boys. It all started for us around the football season of 1974 to 75, recalled one of speaking on condition of anonymity. We were just a group of friends from around Levenshulme, Beswick and North Manchester, with one thing in common: Manchester City Football Club. We would meet in Manchester City Centre, in one of the amusement arcades on London Road on match days. There, we would often wait for rival fans coming off trains and heading for the match buses to take them to Main Road. If you were ever outnumbered, then you would have to take your belt off, because the belt was the weapon of choice, a Levi buckle around the head. We would go to away games together, most by train, though sometimes we would hitchhike from Knutsford services. We would arrive in a town or a city, ransack some of the shops for clothes and money, then on to the match, where sometimes we would try and get into the other team's end for a punch-up. On a lot of the journeys home there would be someone with us who would have money or clothing that they had taken that day. However, like the Cool Cats before it, the main line was still unable to unite all the diverse mobs. This is one of the reasons why City's firms were never talked about in the same conversation as Leeds, Millwall, Chelsea, West Ham, and even Manchester United. Many white lads did not want to be seen with the black gangs and went their own way. Had we all united and joined up, we would have got the same respect as all those other mobs. In January 1984, City fans hit the headlines when they rampaged through Blackpool. The attraction of the seaside resort made it an early start, and the mob had arrived by 10:30 in the morning. Blackpool's Benny's mob were out in force too, and got the better of at least one visiting mob near the ground before kick-off. But during and after the game, the City mob was too big to handle. The game was held up for several minutes, as hundreds of the City fans spilled onto the pitch, fought with the police. This is what a member of the Young Guvnors said. "Our lads took liberties all day long. They robbed the ticket office before the match and were selling tickets outside to City fans, so a lot of the City lads got into the Blackpool end. When Blackpool scored their goals, all hell broke loose. The City fans turned on the police and started fighting them. The police backed off. A couple of Manchester lads had got onto the roof of the stand and were chucking asbestos off. Chunks of it were falling down, and our lads started throwing it at the police. That was going on for about 40 minutes, and the police could not control it." Of the most violent incidents during the mainline era was a battle against Stoke City at the Rothersthorpe service station on the M1 in December 1984. City fans heading for Charlton Athletic arrived there just before a coachload of Stoke heading to Chelsea, and a huge ruck, lasting almost 10 minutes, broke out all over the service station. Rival coaches were trashed, several people hurt and 100 people arrested. One of those jailed for the tear-up was Donald Francis. Of many good times following City, one of the best was Millwall away in 1986, because of who they were and what we did. These were the boys with the big reputation. It was the big one, and most of our lads turned up. There's not many that go there with 60 or 70, but we did, and we were drinking and walking around there, and had no bother until we reached their ground. There were no police with us at all during the day until we reached the den. Then, there was a minor disturbance, and the police got us all in the ground. We won the game 1-0. Of the other groups had arrived on coaches, which by now had been smashed to pieces, so the police decided to put us all together to go home on the train. With the whole group now all joined up, there was between 200 and 250 of us. Millwall tried to ambush us at London Bridge Station, but we chased them off. So we had got in and out of the Lion's Den with and without the police. Not many mobs could match that. Another very notable incident I want you viewers to hear about is this one. In April 1975, the FA Cup final replay between Fulham and Birmingham City took place at Main Road. It was on a Wednesday night and proved to be one of the most violent encounters to ever happen in Manchester. You had Fulham, aided by big mobs of Cockney thugs from various teams. Then you had the Brummie boot boys, skins, blacks, rastas, rockers and all sorts of thugs. Then you had, for the first and last time ever, a Manchester coalition. A truce was made between all City and United gangs of Manchester. It was strange seeing the Salford Reds alongside the Gorton Blues, sworn enemies for years before and after. All the Manc firms met in Piccadilly Gardens at 6 o'clock. Present that night were the Reds of Stretford, Davyhulme, Chorlton, Wythenshawe, Salford, Cheetham Hill, Moston, Middleton and the City mobs from Moss Side, Gorton, Levenshulme, Denton, Failsworth, Stalybridge, Ardwick and Burnage. There must have been over 500 proper lads, many wearing their perspective scarves. All day, thousands of Brummies had been pouring into Manchester, and by 5 o'clock, many of the city centre pubs were filling up with them. The Cockneys began arriving by train via Piccadilly a bit later, and there were many brawls outside the station between the Brummies and Cockneys. Meanwhile, this massive Manc firm of thugs marched towards Main Road, and by the time they got to the ground, many Cockneys and Brummies were already there. There was a mass punch-up on the forecourt outside the ticket office. Well over 1,000 youths from all over England fighting and kicking each other. Added to this, the overzealous Manc cops were wading in with their big sticks, and many people got badly hurt. It was mayhem, and this tear-up lasted over 20 minutes before the old Bill brought some sort of sanity. Most of the Mancs made their way to the North Stand, a couple of hundred into the bottom of the Kippax, whilst the Brummies soon filled most of the Kippax. Fulham and the Cockneys were in the top far corner of the Kippax. The Brummies terrorised the Cockneys for most of the game, but when the gates opened for the last 10 minutes, all the Mancs from the North Stand piled into the Kippax, up those huge steps at the back. But the Brummies forced us back down and onto the car park. They outnumbered us greatly. They had thousands of lads. Us Mancs grouped together on the car park and waited for the end of the match. At the final whistle, the Brummies came charging down the steps and onto the car parks. They had lost 1-0, and as the Cockneys celebrated, the Brummies was going apeshit, attacking the old Bill and any normal fans they came across that was not wearing Birmingham City colours. Although we had well over 500 lads, the Brummies soon had us on our toes. Reds accused City of running, and City accused Reds of running. The truth is that the coalition fell apart, and many City and United lads began attacking each other as they fled through the streets of Moss Side. This played into the Brummies' hands, divide and conquer. They really rampaged for the next couple of hours, many of them marching into the city centre, smashing up bars and pubs. The old Bill couldn't cope, although there were many arrests. City and United split up and just looked after themselves, but neither made any great impact against the mad Brummies. This failed coalition, and the fact that the Brummies took over the Kippax, and indeed Manchester, really hurt. City and United fell out big time, and both threatened to really turn each other over when they next played one another. Unlike the Scousers, the Mancs could not stick together, and the hatred between both sets of fans still exists to this day. A lot of you football lads are very aware of this, but some of the smaller football clubs in England have very good firms. There are lots of examples of this I could give you, but just for this video I will retell a story about Walsall FC that comes directly from a City lad. These are his own words about a less known tear-up. 1998-99 season brought an unexpected encounter. 18 of us got a mini coach to Walsall away, said Tommy Gunn. No bother, we thought, just a day on the piss. Anyway, We bumped into two of their lads in a pub on the outskirts. They said, did we fancy a pop at their firm? We thought they were taking the piss, but we agreed and they said they would meet us in a pub. So, 20 minutes later, we pull up outside and bounce off the coach straight into the lads outside. As we are fighting in the car park, it's getting sticky and we back off 10 yards down the road and let a few of their bods up. Then the pub empties. And to be fair, it's even numbers and we got hammered. People on the deck, noses west, claret everywhere. We were in a right mess. I will never forget that day. The ground, and I was ill. Walsall minced us, to be fair. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.